So, hi everyone. I'm here with Adam Rathbone today, and he's the senior sales engineer for Boost AI. They are in the web chat, messaging chat, communications space. I think originally you're based in the Nordics, but obviously you're based in the UK and looking after the UK market. So Adam, thanks very much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
No, thanks, Chris, and a pleasure to be here. Appreciate the ask to join.
So what are you seeing in terms of messaging, bots, and customer communications? It's been around for a while, but it feels like that's sort of been ramping up recently, particularly since the pandemic. I'd say. I mean, what are you seeing with your clients?
Yeah, it certainly feels like the market is starting to mature now in
Mm,
terms of what is possible through a
mm,
chatbot, through
mm,
web messaging, however you want to describe it. As you mentioned, this is technology that's been around for a while. I mean, Boost have been going for 7 years, but there's been other vendors that have been
mm,
going a lot longer. Chatbots aren't new, but post pandemic, people had to rethink their customer engagement strategies. Contact centers were shut, people were working from home. They become more and more prevalent as a channel. And I think now, post OpenAI and the
mm,
generative AI, there's a whole new AI hype and focus on what can be done around automation.
mm. Do you think our relationship with digital forms of communications has changed over the last few years? You mentioned the pandemic and open AI. It does feel like our relationships have changed, and we're sort of like we got almost like got used to communicating in a different way. Do you sort of see that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, if you think about your own communication habits, and channels like WhatsApp or social media, they're part of everybody's daily life. And think about how many conversations you have on the phone versus 5 years ago.
Mm,
And then compare that to what are you doing in a messaging channel perspective. And
mm,
we're constantly having conversations in group chats on a WhatsApp. And I think that behavior is just carried through and expectations for
mm.
B2C communication.
Do you find that companies have been laggards to invest in it because they have to deal with everyone, not just you as an individual, right? So it feels like what the consumers are doing might be one thing, but there always feels like there's a few years in terms of that sort of flowing through into the almost like the corporate kind of environment. I mean, are you seeing like adoptions rates increasing? I mean, what are you seeing? Is it sort of dramatically increasing, or is it just continuing on a steady trend?
I think it feels like, again, just to go back to post chat GPT, I think
Mm,
that's been a bit of a shot in the arm in terms of refocusing people's minds on what actually is possible versus maybe what they would have
mm,
launched into their brand's websites or apps before. So it feels like adoption is going back up. There's
mm,
more conversations around the art of the possible. And I can combine that with the current economic climate where brands are having to look at their costs to
mm,
serve and starting to think, well, if we can automate these processes, then do we need a human for these high frequency, low complexity tasks?
mm.
Or we've got the right vendor, then absolutely we can do that. I think people are starting to look at it from a number of different ways.
Yeah, and do you think that the AI piece is the utility of it has sort of gone up as a result of it? Do you think that's driving it, or I suppose the cost piece?
That's a good question. I think certain industries may look at the cost side, but I think having worked in this space for the last 5 to 6 years, it certainly feels like now AI is at the forefront of every organization. That's coming down from the C suite, where
Mm,
people are looking and going, well, how are we using AI in our business? Every brand I'm speaking to at the minute, it feels like there's an AI task force in house. And they're not just looking at it from a customer engagement perspective, but for the overall business, how can it help them internally? A lot of those conversations are also centered around build versus buy.
mm,
Do they go out to a vendor like a Boost or a comparable, or can they now they could hook into an open AI using their APIs? Can they build something that works and what's best for their business?
mm. And you guys obviously work across multiple sectors, multiple industries. Do you find there are some that are further ahead than others?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a Boost perspective, we target our strong market within regulated industries. So
Mm,
financial services, insurance, public sector, etc. But there are then within there brands that will be risk averse
mm,
because they're heavily regulated and they have seen a number of high profile use cases where it's gone wrong, where it has had
Mm,
hallucination, where, Chevrolet sold a car for $1 because
mm,
that's what Chatbot told them. They're worried and nervous about going fully fledged uh, into the generative space. But then you have people on the other side, and I think the most high profile one in the last year has been Klarna, where they've gone all in on generative AI, doing the work of around 700 FTEs, and
mm.
they can handle every conversation. So maybe on the retail side, they're a little bit further ahead, but they're not as heavily
I
regulated.
suppose they have more volume, don't they? So they have lower ticket prices, higher volume versus high ticket prices. You wouldn't want to be selling corporate jets necessarily. You'd probably want to pick up the phone for that, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
And you mentioned AI there, and I know messaging has gone through that evolution in a way between being almost rules-based, decision-based to now incorporating elements of AI. Where do you see that taking us to a certain extent? Talk a little bit around the hesitations there are around sort of transparency and those kind of things.
What I'm seeing from the brands that I'm speaking to, using the Boost technology, is a hybrid approach. It's using conversational AI in its purest form, the ability for natural language understanding to be able to listen or read what a customer is typing when it's engaging with a chatbot, understand their intent, and then take them down to a flow that can
Mm,
handle that end-to-end process. And that's your traditional chatbots. And that's why there's so many bad chatbots, because there's
mm,
some poor NLU out there, or brands don't typically have their long tail of customer contact reasons trained and
mm,
ability to serve them within a bot. But it's having that combined with the generative AI. Both have strengths and they both have weaknesses. This is why we go for a hybrid, because generative AI, for example, its ability to handle turns in customer conversations is unique, and it's where it's really adding value. If you think about when you're speaking to a contact center agent, as humans, we have the ability to understand, and you ask me a question or you tell me something, Chris, and I can respond accordingly. And where
mm.
chatbots historically, and why, when I tell people what I do, I'm often greeted with the response of, "Oh, I hate chatbots," or "Oh, you
Yeah.
built poor chatbots." It's because they've not been trained to handle when a customer all of a sudden switches context or has more than one query that they can resolve, and they just come back with, "I'm sorry, I don't understand," or
Mm,
something along those lines. Where generative AI can help with that, and it can handle the different turns and nuances of human communication. But by having a hybrid approach for those that are potentially nervous around hallucinations, or are potentially nervous around handing AI the keys to how they respond and the content that's going to be customer facing, you can use Gen AI where it's strong, but then transfer out into a more structured, conversational AI flow where you've got to be lasered on. This is the process. These are the types of
mm,
questions. This is the wording that we need to use for this particular journey.
mm.
So that's where these great opportunities, and we're seeing people getting immense value out of that. But then there is the nervous people, there's the risks and hallucinations, making sure that you've got the right level, the right amount of guardrails, and set up right and have been tested thoroughly to avoid situations like DPD, where somebody who clearly knew about prompting, clearly
Mm.
knew that they could manipulate a bot, and got that to go rogue and to say why it was the worst delivery company, swear and write haikus and all of that
Yeah.
type.
So it's almost like you have the AI almost acting as almost like that almost like thinking layer, I wanted to say on top. I'm cautious using the word thinking, but that thinking layer which is directed. Then when you have something that requires policy or a process, now to go through a more automated traditional kind of process because you've got compliance sign off as an example for that, or you've ticked the right boxes in terms of communicating the right elements. So is that kind of how you're thinking about it?
Yeah, absolutely right. So I'll give an example. We work with a lot of banks, financial service based customers. When Gen AI first came out, probably the first raft of use cases were all around having the ability to ingest documents, ingest knowledge,
Mhm.
and then put that to a customer facing bot where you could just say, "I'm speaking to my bank. I'm interested in mortgage. What's the interest rate today?" Or I need to port my mortgage. How do I do that? Or I'm a first time buyer. I don't know. And then this is where brands would have spent a lot of time creating those FAQs, those knowledge articles. The generative AI will be able to understand and go, okay, right, I've got an answer to that. And let's take that knowledge base, let's take that FAQ document and answer in the context in which the customer is asking the question,
Mm.
human like in a conversational way. And that's great. But where they fell short was, well, this person is asking a question because they want to do something. No, I'm asking around mortgage rates because I want to take out a mortgage or I'm
Right,
buying a
right,
new,
right.
because they didn't have those processes built in. That's where they would fall short. And then they'd have to pick up the phone and speak to their mortgage advisor or the contact center or send an email. So what should be a great experience then turns into a bit of a negative because they're not able to
Yeah.
service in channel. But now having that hybrid, I could program the generative AI bot to go, well, here's Adam's asking questions around mortgages. And then if he just says, okay, brilliant, how do I apply? Take it out of that flow, then you've got a specific set of questions or steps that any mortgage provider would say, well, to do a mortgage, you need to do A, B, and C.
So
And that's the structured flows that
yeah.
you can.
So it's almost like if you think of it in terms of like a good agent can not only just answer the query, sort of, just provide the answer. It's also around, you know, steering the conversation towards outcomes and good outcomes.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of talk in this industry recently around, so historically we've had conversational designers and people
Mm,
who understand the customer journey and know how to put that into a process that a good virtual assistant or chatbot can follow and
mm,
deliver great customer experience. And there's been a lot of talk around, well, is Gen AI going to impact that role or that
mm,
skill set? When actually it's just adding another string to their bow because they still know great customer journeys. They still know
mm,
how to create these great experiences that delight customers. But all they're doing now is relearning and doing things like learning prompts,
mm,
being able to train AI to then not only, to your point, Chris, not only answer the question, but try and drive like a good human agent. The next step, okay,
mm,
you're asking questions around mortgage. Would you like help applying for a mortgage? Is this
mm,
something that you would like to do now? It's creating those instructions around when you answer them. This is
mm.
what we'd like you to do.
To your point, one of the things that frustrates customers is they can't get to the answer. And that speed to the answer seems like a universal measure. How quickly can I get what I want? That can either be on the telephone, it can be through, messaging, it can be through letter even, right? And that speed to answer and speed to do what I need to do is quite common, right? So if you don't pick up the phone, you get frustrated. If you can't get the answer through the chatbot, you get frustrated. And so it's like, how do you facilitate that to keep that short as possible? But that sounds like that's true even in the chatbot world to a certain extent, or the AI messaging world as well, which is you still want to get the customer to where they want to go and what their desires are as quick as possible.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Speed to resolution. That's what we want to do. And if you think around why, historically with designing chatbots and why they became a thing is that it should be the quickest route to get an answer. You're typing on an interface or using your phone on a channel like WhatsApp and you have to be questioning and get the answer. You're not having to be on hold. You're not having to wait for somebody to reply an email. It should be instantaneous.
Yeah. I mean, so one of the things, just as we're still chatting about AI, is that we have these large language models, and there's quite general models, right? And I was looking at one today because you can download some of them. They're huge models. You bring them in, and they basically have the weightings for almost like a lot of the internet, basically sitting there right in your computer. Do you think we'll ever get down to much more specialist models? So if I'm asking a question, a general AI, I can ask anything. I can say, "What's the best? When will my washing be finished? I don't know." Or "What's the best dishwasher to use?" Even though I might be having a financial services conversation, and you probably want to constrain that so it's limited to within the box that you want to talk about. But do you think we'll ever get to smaller specialist trained models that can be used particularly within certain customers or certain contexts to a certain extent?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said earlier, most big organizations that I'm speaking to have got those AI task force and they're looking at
Mm,
creating those models or fine tuning models for their data and for
mm,
their organization and work for the things that they need them to do in their business. So we're certainly heading that way. And, you know, there's a lot of competition with all the major tech providers. Obviously, OpenAI seem to be at the forefront and the one that
Mm.
most know, but you know, Meta, Google, Amazon, they're all in the mix. They're all creating things. So, and the speed in which everything is progressing at the minute,
Mm.
it just feels we're so used to, let's say, Apple, who, you know, in my generation seem to have been the major tech innovators and
Yeah.
have their annual launches every year where the new iPhone is released, the new iPad, what are the new updates that are coming. And that would almost be a yearly calendar event. Whereas in generative AI and this new world that we're in, every week you just get unannounced, hey, OpenAI can now do this. And look what we're doing with voice and content creation. The amount of AI startups that have come off the back in the last year, it's hard to keep up.
Yeah, that is, yeah. I mean,
And
how do clients react to that? If it's hard for you to keep up, or hard for some of us to keep up, if you're sitting there and you've got an operation you're running, right? I mean, it can be even more of a challenge to kind of keep up, particularly if they're brand new. I mean, how are you seeing people adapting to that and sort of like looking at, because it can be overwhelming in terms of just being too much choice, and a lot of this stuff's new and untested as well. I think will be they're also their fear.
yeah, you can look at some of the startups and then you can see some amazing demos and books, but they look good on paper. They haven't got the customers, the use cases, the
Mhm.
testimonials to back it up. So there will always be a bit of nervousness. The way was a booster trying to allay some of those fears is that, you know, this is our speciality. We're not just a startup. We've been in the conversational AI space for 7 years now. And we're thinking around how generative AI can complement what we're already doing, making sure, given that we're working in these regulated industries, we're not going to cause people to
Mm.
think, I'm worried about this. And we'll carefully explain the roadmap and why we're building things and what we're doing from a trust perspective or from a safety perspective. Like, I don't know how much experience you've got of working with an audit company, Chris, but they're very stringent on security. I mean, we're the only conversational AI vendor that's double ISO certified. So
Right, right.
it's something that is thought about and they think of that before the product and what it looks like.
Yeah. You're talking around cost and productivity, and obviously these technologies obviously can be used to do that. How do we think about, I suppose, blending automated messaging or conversations with and agents as well, and having more traditional? I mean, how are you seeing that in terms of like people making that sort of the blend between the two, when to send through to an agent versus not? How do you combine the two to a certain extent? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, a great question. And again, I think it depends on the organization. So, you know, why we're so strong in the market and why we're successful is our ability to automate at, at scale.
Hmm.
You know, there's a lot of bot providers that can maybe do to 10, some good ones, 30 to 40 customer
Hmm.
journey where they can do end to end without having to speak to a human agent. Whereas we can build out a long tail. You know, we have banks in the Nordics that have 2,500 customer topics or intents trained, and they're reaching scales of like 70%
Hmm.
automation. And that isn't just answering FAQs. This is, I want to do something and we're having to integrate into a back end system to
Yeah.
pull information or update information. So it's there, but at the same time, we're also mindful that for certain customer topics, you can't be a human. You need
Hmm.
to speak to a human. They're going to be the best person to resolve that query or question. So it's how can you use AI to support the agent in a live chat or a web messaging example? We call them agent assist tools.
Yeah.
And it's just really, how can we make that person who's speaking to another human's life easier?
Yeah.
Can we pass them information? Can we summarize the conversation? Is there tools that are there that are just going to streamline the processes they need to do,
Yeah.
help support that customer?
Yeah. I mean, Copilot was a great name for it, but unfortunately got taken, didn't it? By default, it's been taken, at least anyway, by a rather large company that that can promote it around the world. But yeah, so it's almost like that handy helper to a certain extent in terms of how can you help and add to the journey, right?
And yeah, absolutely. I think there was a reason for that as well, because this technology was so new and so exciting and got the hype and was going mainstream news. People were starting to get worried about AI taking over the world and Terminator
Mm.
and all of
Yeah.
that crazy stuff. Because it was so new and there was so much nervousness, most brands went down the route of, well, let's use generative AI from the agent side first. Let's create a co-pilot tool where the
Mm.
human agent can observe what is being sent to the customer and control and make sure that that he isn't sending anything factually incorrect or where hallucinations may have appeared, and allow people to dip the toe in the water that way, as opposed to just going,
Mm.
let's do a customer facing Gen AI bot to start off.
What kind of KPIs are kind of useful in terms of digital adoption? Obviously, you can look at how many you get initiated through web chat versus through a call, but then also the length of the journey as well. What kind of KPIs would you recommend we could look at?
And I think we're seeing a bit of a sea change in this space.
Mm.
Historically, people would throw around the word containment,
Mm.
and that seemed to be the main one that brands would say, hey, we've got this customer live and they're getting 60% containment rate with their bot. But it was a bit of a false metric,
Mm.
because containment could have been that you started a conversation, Chris, and it's gone, I'm sorry, I don't understand. And you've exited and picked up the phone.
Mm.
But in the eyes of that KPI, the bot has
Yeah.
contained your conversation. It hasn't
Yeah.
resolved. When we're designing chatbots or virtual assistants, as we like to call them, are we resolving what we're setting out to do? Has the
Mm.
customer gone through the process? And if they want to change their address, have they successfully been able to do that? Therefore, we've delivered on what the journey should be. So we're looking at automation rates from are they able to do the end-to-end process? And
So
that's
if their intent was to change the addresses, what percentage of those did they get to the end without human intervention to reach the end of that intent?
And that's what we're measuring automation rates on. And then you can then start to measure that of, well, what would that cost if that was a human agent speaking to that? So that's why I often talk about high frequency but low complexity tasks, like
Mm.
a change of address. I've just moved house and I've gone through a number of change address processes, and
Yeah.
they're not all as straightforward as they should be, which is
Yeah.
more.
Well, I think the other piece is time to change address as well, right? Which is, can you do it through the chatbot, and is that quicker than it would be manually? And getting measures around that as well. I think that'd be interesting too.
Yeah, exactly. The effort is there. Some people may then add in additional CSAT, NPS metrics off the back of that. But I always feel that if I need to do something and I can do it up from the comfort of my phone on my sofa in a
Mm.
couple of minutes, where I'm not having to speak to a human, and I can do that at 9 o'clock at night when the contact centers are closed. That's ultimately what I want to do,
Mm.
and how you should be measuring.
And what about implementing some of these systems? What are some of the complexities around that? What are some of the important things to think about if you're looking to do it? There's quite a lot of work and understanding what your procedures are. Some of that stuff has to be codified, I'd imagine.
Yeah, yeah. So they can be quite complex, and I guess it's just starting to think around. Right. Well, if we're going to create a bot,
Mm.
what is it that we're trying to achieve? You
Mm.
know, are we just looking to focus on some specific use cases, and therefore we might only have the chatbot visible on certain areas of the website
Mm.
where customer might be looking change address and a bot pops up, hey, I can help you change the address,
Mm.
and they can go through that journey. Or do you want it at the top of funnel, front and center on your website or any of
Mm.
those messaging channels? So it's all around what is it that you're trying to achieve, and then understanding, well, what are those journeys that they need to do? What other technology do we need to be mindful of? Are we pulling data out of a CRM? Are we having
Mm.
to connect to an in-house built system that contains customer information or billing
Mm.
platform, or whatever it is? And just being mindful that if there's data, it can be easily pulled out of those systems or pushed back into there. and that you've got third party connectors that can help with those journeys. Because I always tell people we can automate anything, but we can only automate it if we've got access to that
Mhm,
third party platform. Sometimes in certain sectors, unfortunately, that might not always be the easiest thing to get.
mhm. Yeah, some places it's easier than it used to be, though, I do think, but it's, yeah, not always easy, right?
It's easier than it used to be, but for example, public sector
Yeah,
can always be a challenge
yeah.
because data's housed in certain systems, and there might be a cost to extracting that or work from certain parties to enable it. We try and simplify that process. We've got out of the box connectors.
Mm,
We make it easier for people to build API calls into our platform and then reuse them at any customer journey. So
mm,
once the development has been done, you don't need to be a technical person to go, oh, okay, in this part of the customer journey, I need to update Salesforce or
mm.
whatever.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember tape runs and tape backups.
Yeah.
I don't mean ticker tape. I mean sort of like magnetic tape, but the big things you used to put on
Yeah.
the yeah, those kind of things. And it's probably I probably got more memory in my watch now than I had in any of those things. It's just mad, isn't it? So
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I guess some of the other things to consider as well is like, well, what if we're not automating, maybe we can partially automate that and help the
mm,
human agent by capturing some information or doing some of the legwork and then being able to successfully pass that over with all of the context, with all of the data that we've gathered so far, so that human agent can successfully complete the task. There's a lot of things to consider.
it's a super interesting space. Where do you think we'll be in 5 years or so? What's your prediction? It's moved so much, even in the last 3 months. Where do you think we're going to go?
Wow. It's a
Hard
tough.
one.
I mean, our CEO was talking yesterday in the town hall around the opportunity that presents us, and
Mm,
his words were, "This is the big." He's been ex Salesforce and has been in the tech industry for 20 odd years, and he was like, "This is the biggest opportunity
mm,
that we have had in my lifetime around AI and what the possibilities are for organizations." I just think that the amount, I mean, people are talking around like humanless contact centers, and you see the stuff that Salesforce have been doing in
mm,
their recent releases. There's a lot of opportunity for taking it on. I still think that there's going to be need for humans in contact centers. I just think that AI is going to help them so much. It's going to help them be able to do things, and hopefully, because unfortunately, as great as technology has been, customer experience is still really bad for a lot of
mm,
organizations
mm,
uh, in, across there. So my hope is that if I get in touch on a social media channel, that whoever's dealing with it can help me
mm,
and not have to say, oh, I can't do that because I'm a siloed team. Go and
mm,
speak web chat or go and pick up the phone. It unifies everything, brings information to all of those agents, and it gives them tools that when I'm asking a question or when I want something updated on my account, they can do it seamlessly and they're not
mm.
having to, this will take 5 business days to update.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. But, hey, we could have a conversation in a year's time and everything that we've thought about is completely on its head and somebody's come out, who knows what someone like Elon Musk might create, right?
I do feel that you can use analogies to look at some of this stuff. I look at like handmade stuff, right? Then we had mass manufacturing, and sort of like mass manufacturing means we've got a lot of stuff we use every day, but there's still that niche for handmade stuff. It's almost more valuable to a certain extent. I wonder if human interaction is going to be more valuable for either higher end, more specialist, more vulnerable, sort of like those kind of things where you really value that human interaction. We're going to emphasize that versus a lot of stuff. Then we're just comfortable because it's commoditized, and we're just comfortable just to do that sort of electronically.
Absolutely. And I think that's, you know, it's when I'm working with a brand, I'll say that it's your genius, your expertise of knowing
Mm,
your business, along with our great technology. And if you think, one of the things that I'm seeing people use our guardrails, for example, is for those specialist topics.
Mm.
So, we talked a little bit around like some of the dangers or the perceived dangers of Gen AI and hallucination. But what we do is topic level guardrails. So it means that customers can create something for each of their journeys. Vulnerable customers, for example, is one that
Mm.
we see a lot of our financial service ones. They're adding in their Gen AI bot an extra process that says, call this function if a customer expresses
Mm.
any relating to vulnerability. And this can be financial vulnerability, situational vulnerability, health vulnerability. And then the AI is listening. And if I was to say, oh, hey, I'm struggling, I've lost my job, it
Mm.
would execute this guardrail, transfer it to a skilled agent. And we're seeing those types of guardrails created not only to protect, but also to look at certain conversations where they still see the
Yeah,
value
yeah, yeah.
of a human to human conversation, where they've invested in their staff, upskilled them to know how to handle those conversations. And I think you're right, Chris. There's still a need, and probably that's more valued now, and people see the skills and the strength that those agents possess.
It just strikes me as much more sort of like, how do we blend the two technologies, be it human beings being a technology or, biological technology, and sort of like, this new technological capability together rather than being one or the other, which tends to be, we like to have these binary conversations, but it's probably a blended conversation to a certain extent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Adam, thanks very much for making the time. Really appreciate it. Fascinating topic. It's amazing how quickly it's moving forward. Great to hear some of the stuff that you guys are up to. It's really fascinating to see how it's moving on.
No, well, pleasure's joining, Chris. Thank you very much for the invite. Even though I've been in this space for a while, this is certainly the most exciting time that I've been in there. And yeah, who knows what the future holds, but I'm very excited about this technology and what capabilities are.
Great stuff. We'll be watching this space.
Thank you very much.